Hello, everybody. This is Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network every Thursday at 1 p.m. And you could also find me on theconsciousresistance.com and theseedsofliberty.com. So today we have Fred Fairbrass, who's the guitarist in Right Said Fred. And you would also most likely recognize him from his infamous video, I Am Too Sexy, from the early 90s. So he's a truth teller, and we're gonna be talking about how he became a truth teller and perhaps his the steps and phases that led up to his questioning the status quo as it stands today. So Fred,
hi.
So why don't you tell us about how you got started down this path?
Okay. Initially, when the band broke in 1991, 92. You become very famous, and there's lots of nonsense written about it in the press. And over a period of years, I started to think some of the stuff. If the smoke and mirrors in the entertainment industry is so all engulfing, it's just crossed my mind that this can't be the only area of information that just kind of tells you what he wants you to hear. And so this sort of the bit by bit, my brain started to get into gear, and then it wasn't really until 9/11. I saw the towers come down, and then subsequently started reading different reports and the reports from different engineers and the architects and the engineers .org, and then guys like Alex Jones, and I got picked up on people like James Corbett, Scott Horton, these different sort of guys, and I just started to think this doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, and so I've always felt we're just fed lies on such a colossal basis and in colossal amounts every day, and I think it's just it was a sort of death by a thousand cuts, really. Little bits of information chipped away at me, and I suddenly just woke up about on the mid-2000s and just thought, this is just nonsense. So it took me a while. I'm not exactly breaking ground here. Trying to catch up with loads of people ahead of me. But I found it really interesting, and also people have preconceptions. If you write a song like "Too Sexy," it suits their preconceptions that you might be a moron, and obviously we didn't do ourselves any favors. In one sense, you take your shirts off, and we were very fit at the time, and people want you to be a bit of a gym junkie and a bit of a moron. And if you prove not to be that, it kind of, people go, oh, think about, he can talk. Whoa, amazing. Ties his own shoelaces. So I've just got really into it in the last 4 years. It's gained a lot of momentum. And I just like the fact that these people like Alex Jones and yourself and Richie Allen, all these guys are just trying to look at it from another's perspective, because mainstream media has its own agendas, and I think it's really good that people are out there trying to express different views.
Yeah, I think 9/11 really did jostle people's feelings of reality. But what's interesting is the response to the United States to 9/11. So there's all these theories about who did it, or if it was an inside job in the government, or whatever. So to me, it doesn't really matter, right? Like who did it. Let's just assume it was the Saudi Arabians that did it, or some Middle Eastern country, and 19 hijackers hijacked these planes, and they killed close to 3,000 people or something like that. And so our retaliation is to kill 1 million Middle Easterners.
Yes.
It's like if somebody assaults you or your family or kills you, your response is to kill them, their family, their extended family, their their distant cousins, everybody. Yes. That's the equivalent, and it's just insane. The kind of. Well,
I think that's what triggered people's thoughts, is that it was so clear that there was agendas, whether the agenda was in place before 9/11 or it was used as a catalyst, but to get the regime change, get into oil rich territories, use not just the Americans, or the British are just as guilty, as are the Spanish and the Australians, and they've all got different troops doing different in different areas of the world, and I think you have to look at what the agenda how the agenda's played out. And democracy is certainly not something that, democracy in the Middle East doesn't interest the Americans or the British governments at all. So I don't care about that. And I think it's, our biggest embarrassment is Tony Blair, who, you may not be aware, but at the time, he sold himself as New Labour, and I'm not a fan of voting. I don't think voting does anything, but New Labour definitely came in all guns blazing, and you'll see the end of corruption. And people actually believed it, and Tony Blair was brilliant at selling it, and he has turned into one of the most toxic ex-PMs that we have ever produced in this country. I mean, and people hate him. I mean, he gets shouted at in the street. He can't go anywhere because people spit and shout and loathe this guy because he lied. He sort of got you in. You kind of annoyed at yourself for believing him. It's like finding out your best mate is banging your wife. It's like, wow, what are you? This is not the deal, And that's what the Tony Blair situation. And he's become so toxic and such a liar, and now the Labour Party are trying to distance themselves from him, although he doesn't seem to be helping that. And I think whatever, I don't know what the truth is behind 9/11. Obviously, like many people, but certainly when you hear people like Judy Woods or William Binney and these people with experience and with a knowledge, and they're discussing what they believe, I think you have to take note of that. I think you'd be silly not to.
Yeah. So you and I were discussing before we recorded about labels, right? What's an anarchist? What's a voluntarist? Yes. What's an anarcho-capitalist? Yes. And one thing that that I have learned from studying this stuff is that there's one you can look at the how things are applied in the real life, or you can look at the philosophy behind it. So when people just look at leaders like Obama and Tony Blair and Bush, they vilify these specific leaders and say, what, if we just had the right person in power, things would work out perfectly, right?
Yes.
And that's the that's the temptation that politicians try to cater to. They try to cater to people's how do you say, gullibility and naivete,
And people want to believe. They want to believe in someone. It's good to have, it's good to see someone. You watch, if you watch the Martin Luther King speeches, there's a beautiful thing to watch and listen. Someone believing in what he says. But when do we ever hear that now? Really, I think it would be great if, in the next, like, you've got the American election kicking off next year, haven't you? The primaries and all that sort of stuff. Yay! Go Hillary! Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if they had to wear the labels of their sponsors, like racing car drivers? So you knew if Hillary Clinton, for example, stood up and she's got Monsanto and the Saudi, the Gulf states and all these, like a racing driver, because at least you would know. Well, hang about, Hillary. If you get in, you're going to get a phone call from Monsanto and Exxon and Microsoft and Penchuk, and then the Saudi Arabias have all got interest. So what part of you do we get? Because they've paid hundreds of millions or tens of millions. And I think it's the same in the UK. Not quite so obvious in the UK, but all political parties have donors, and the Labour typically have the unions, and the Conservatives typically have the banks. Your version of Wall Street. That's kind of how it divides in a very sort of crude way. And I think you have to take that on board, because you're not getting an unencumbered president or prime minister. You're not. They will sit in their chair and go, "Well, this is great. I got there," and the phone will start ringing. And I think you only look at Obama, who did say that he was going to sort out Guantanamo. Clearly, someone has said, "Do you know what, Barack? Don't go near Guantanamo. That's not going to happen, mate. Next, what do you want to do next? Oh, I don't want to do I don't want to roll out the Patriot Act," which he's been more aggressive with the Patriot Act and more anti-whistleblower than any other president. And I think you have to look at that. So clearly there are people. I have this argument all the time with people in England, and I say, when we get this new prime minister, the head of GCHQ, which is your NSA, won't change. Heads of the bank won't change. Heads of securities, that doesn't change. Google, Starbucks, Amazon, all these people are still in place. So where's your power? What exactly are you bringing here? Because you're here for 4 years, 8 years, if you're really lucky. These guys are here for decades. You're just passing through. So where's your influence? You'll walk into the Bank of England, and this guy's sitting there, and he's got, he's got his house in Barbados and his house in Connecticut and everywhere else, and you walk in as a brand new prime minister. What are you bringing to this? You're nothing. And I don't think the British public understand that. And I think the same, slightly different. I think in America, I think the Clinton dynasty and the Bush dynasty do have clout as almost like a commercial force, if you like. We don't have that here. It's a very different animal, and they come and go. So if I was the head of Starbucks and I say so and so in the White House, I wouldn't. Who cares? What are you going to do to me? I run Starbucks. Get lost. Go away.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think I find the whole thing just farcical, and I find voting the most ludicrous idea in the world. And people get cross at me all the time on social media, and they say, "Oh, you're so lazy sitting around." I say, "What? Okay, so you think ticking a box every 5 years makes you really proactive? Really?"
Exactly. If voting changed anything, it'd be illegal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I believe that. I really think if they thought that could change, it changes how we perceive the world, but it doesn't really change reality.
So when I talk to people about voting, it's either I say it's either voting is useless and counterproductive. I mean, well useless and just a waste of your time, or yes, it actually achieves what you want to. And what you are doing, people don't really understand this, but what you are doing when you vote is you are attempting to subjugate your neighbor, right? It turns everyone into a little dictator trying to impose their worldview on other people, right? By force, yep, by the guns of government, right? Yep. And so that's that's what the political process is it's a contest to who can impose forcefully their yes worldviews on the rest of the population. Yes. And if yep you lose, you get their view forced on you, and it's just yes such a violent system that people, I don't understand how people make the connection that, government is community, it's everybody coming yeah together, we're all in this together. No. Yes. It's us. No. It's us, and it's the ruling class. It's a clear difference. Yes,
it is. There's a massive difference, yeah. And also the ruling class aren't even in government. The ruling class are behind government, telling government how this is going to work. I can't imagine for 1 minute that, you've got, you take a guy like, guys like Bill Gates, the amount of money, the guys that run Google, the amount of money and influence they have, to imagine that they won't make their feelings felt fairly strongly to Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush, whoever happens to be in the race. I think it's naive. These people, you don't get that to be that successful and powerful without feeling that your view needs to be heard. I just don't. I can't. If I was a billionaire and sitting around watching this happen, I would think, well, hang about, I've got a say in this. I would.
Yeah.
Because.
And that's a major complaint that a lot of people, when I talk about a voluntary society completely absent of government coercion, that's one of the first objections I get is, wouldn't corporations just band together and become a cartel, control the marketplace, shaft the customer, raise prices? And what's to stop from a corporation from like buying weapons, buying tanks, and just forcing people to buy their product? And I'm saying, wait a minute, what is the difference between that fear that you have and what we have today called government?
Exactly. Yeah, it's the same.
What is the difference?
Yeah, of course it's the same. I find the whole thing I find people's view about it just absolutely insane. And I think it would be great. We have our elections are in May 7th, I think, is the election day. And I think if you had a 5% turnout where everybody just stood outside Parliament and booed, you'd have to undermine it. There'd be no credibility for any of the governments to move, any of the parties to move forward. I personally think you need that degree of non-compliance for a change to happen, because nothing is going to change. I don't know if you've read about it, but in the UK we have huge issues with child abuse in Westminster, in government, and allegedly it goes up as far as the royal family and big business, and it's a very big scandal over here. We are never going to get to the bottom of it, ever. These kids will never get proper representation under any of these governments because they all have something to lose. And I think same as private speech, privacy and freedom of speech is being pissed at the toilet. It's people don't realise the degree to what they're losing. And in the UK, there's a lady who was arrested because she stood outside. She stood on Whitehall, which is the road that runs very close to where the Prime Minister lives, and she read the names of the dead soldiers from a newspaper. She got arrested under the Terrorist Act.
Wow.
I mean, really, yeah. And so I find all that stuff very scary. And there'll be cameras in our houses next. That's what they want. You know, it'll be that insane.
It's a crime for private citizens to reveal the crimes committed by government.
Yes.
Right. So I don't know if you follow Larkin Rose at all, but he talks about, you know,
I should.
You do?
I know, I should, clearly. But
Yeah, definitely look him up. He's really an awesome personality, and I read.
I know the name. But
yeah, he's posted a bunch of videos and he's written a couple of books. But you know, one of his so basically, government, according I think he basically coined this term, the belief and the myth of authority. So government is basically founded on two basic pillars, which is one is taxation, and the other one is the belief in the myth of authority. And they're both necessary, because without the belief in the myth of authority, so it's like when people believe it's not, you know, authority is not just the right, it's not just the ability to rule, it's not just, you know, I can enslave somebody and subjugate them, because anybody can do that, right? But you would be called, you know, a rapist or a murderer or some thief, right? You would not be considered government, right? So the ability of authority has to be given legitimacy. If it's authority, it is legitimate, right? So if it's authority, they're taking your money, and it's not extortion, it's called taxation, right? And if they're killing people overseas, it's not called murder, it's called war, the war on terror, right? You know, if
conflict.
Or conflict. If they're you know, counterfeiting money, you know, in the central bank, it's not called counterfeiting, it's called quantitative easing or currency creation or the Mandrake mechanism. Or so there's all these political euphemisms applied to government that, if the same exact thing were done by private citizens, would be criminal.
Absolutely,
right?
Of course.
So this is why the belief in the myth of authority is what separates people from viewing government as just a big gang, a big mafia, the largest mafia on a geographical area. And, you know, it's what makes it completely different than, let's say, a local mafia who controls like a few towns, let's say, you know, because the people in these towns would not consider the threats and commands of the mafia as laws, because then it would be viewed as legitimate. Rather, they just view them as threats and commands. So this is the basic difference. When we can stop. And this is what I'm trying to do, and what many people on the Voluntary Virtues Network and Larkin Rose is trying to tell people that, you know, when you believe in an authority figure, what you're saying is this person has superhuman rights that I don't have, right? They can do something and I can't do it because it would be criminal, but they can do it because they're special.
Yeah.
That's.
I mean, one of my big bugbears is taxing taxed money. So I have $100 and they take $40 and I've got 60 left and I go and buy something. It's taxed. I put petrol in my car. It's you're taxing every single thing people do. I mean, it's insane, and it's theft. It is just theft. I understand we've all got to contribute. We've all got to make our, you know, stuff doesn't happen without money. I get all that. It makes perfect sense. But part of the taxation, what's the word I'm looking for? Belief system is based on the fact that we're meant to believe that they spend the money wisely. Well, clearly they don't. Billions are wasted. If it was efficient, then the tax at source would probably be enough. But because it's inefficient, because there's corruption, because there's extortion and lies, they need more and more. And they could take 100% of our money. It would not be enough, because it's theft. These people have no interests in our interests, none. And that's a huge. I get quite upset about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, saying how I think it was this week, right, was you know, tax day, National Extortion Day in the United States, and And so you have to wonder, like what you said, what if I tell people 100% of your income is stolen, that's slavery, right? And then
Yep.
0% of your income is stolen. What percentage in between is it not slavery? Right?
Absolutely right.
And
Exactly.
and
Where's the criteria? Yeah.
and there is no percentage that is not. If anything above 0% is indeed slavery, because even if it's 0.5%, if it's forced against your will, then you don't own your income at all.
Yes,
The government is
exactly.
is giving you back a gift of whatever they didn't take, right?
Yeah.
They had
Yeah.
it's completely arbitrary and completely
is.
forced. So
Yeah, it is completely false, and I think what drives us insane over here is exactly what you say. It's a corny old statement, but one rule for them, one rule for us. And we had the MPs' expenses scandal, where basically their expenses had got out of control, so they would go on holiday and it's our expense. They'd buy a second car for the wife, it's our expense. That has been tightened up a little bit, but not nearly enough, and they're still creaming the system. And it's become a gravy train. Public service has just become a great way to earn some money, and it looks good on your CV, and off you go to the private sector.
so
I find it's sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say you reminded me of a video that Larkin Rose did called "If You Were King," and I'm not sure if you're familiar. Also, there was in Plato's The Republic, he mentioned his famous book The Republic. He mentioned philosopher kings. Like he believed that an ideal society would be ruled by philosophers, right? That they're the only people that are eligible and able to lead a society, morally and justly. So basically, in his video, If You Were King, he's basically saying how there really is no such thing as a moral authority figure, because any mandate, any edict they do has to be forced on everybody categorically against the will of the people, right? Even if it's voted on, okay, then they each then they force it, and it's a government is always a one size fits all. And even if the king or the emperor or the president or the prime minister did nothing, absolutely nothing, just sitting in his home, that would still be considered extortion, because he's surviving on taxation, which is again involuntary, right?
Yes,
so,
it is,
so there really is. I mean, even if he's helping the poor, that's when people say, well, don't if you don't want to pay taxes, you're saying you don't want to help the poor, you're saying you don't want to help the elderly and the sick. No, of course not. It's just like I don't want the fruits of my labor stolen from me and done with whatever the politicians think is worthy. If we're going to help the poor, we can help them voluntarily. People donate to charities, to different kind of institutions like that. We can do that. So
also with the huge debts America has, the huge debts the UK has, Europe, the euro is struggling. All our taxes go into this abyss, which is the deficit, and then they have to borrow money back from the banks to pay for the very things that they've taken our tax for. All we're doing is chipping away at a debt that gets bigger and bigger. So this idea, I have this conversation all the time, and people say, well, you've earned good money, you should pay this amount. So I don't mind paying my tax, but it's being wasted. That's my problem. First of all, it's going into this whole called debt. They drag it out again to pay for something. They're paying the bank's interest on my tax money. Mm-hmm. It's an insane system. And I find the whole thing just I find it depressing how people just follow what pretty much they're told to do by mainstream media, particularly in this country, because we have a history of rebellion in this country. We have chopped off kings' heads if they've pissed us off. We have. That's what the English spirit was about for centuries. We were quite insane. We wouldn't take any nonsense, and we would go and attack government buildings. And now we roll over. Everyone just goes, yeah, okay. You're so busy watching X Factor or some other nonsense, And I kind of think it's a shame. We seem to have lost our spine and our bite, I think so. And we're only here for such a short time. We should try and make some impression. For Christ's sake, So anyway,
definitely no. So talking about your taxes, and you say if there went to something useful, then you would have no problem, right? But
Yeah.
the way I look at it is, the fact that, because the way voluntarists describe government, it's a monopoly on initiated aggression, right? They have the
Right.
monopoly on force. They have all the guns. They have the tanks. They
Yep.
have everything.
Yes, they do.
So they can enforce the edicts of the politicians by
Yes.
the police and the military, right? Those are the agencies that give it teeth and
Yes.
force,
Yes,
right?
it is. Yeah.
So basically, there is really nothing that can compete with the government. That's the definition of a monopoly, right? So if taxes were not going towards something useful or efficient, what could we really do about it? Again, like you said, go back to voting. Just press a button. That's all we can do. Or
exactly.
write to your politician. Basically begging your politician, begging your master, more accurately put. So
I think
go ahead.
I think non-compliance for me, just people just stopping, going, do you know what? We're done. Yeah, because and I have a real thing. This is our country. I mean, I know you're in America, but I'm in the UK. But I'm English. I pay my tax here. It's my freaking country, and we should all stand. Just go right. Unless you represent us fairly, unless you do the right thing, the game's up. You can't have our tax money. You can't go on holiday to Barbados on our taxes and have your mistresses and all the other stuff you do. Let's start again. New line in the sand. And what's happened is we've got into such a mindset. It's not just you that we have no control. Well, we do. It's ours. We are the masses. And it drives me mad that people think they don't have control. And as an individual, it's easy to think you don't. But I think just sharing information is a degree of control. It all adds fuel to the fire. It all does. And I think what's great about the internet, which is this one of the last bastions of freedom, if you like, where you're right across the world, people sharing their ideas. And I think it's vital, and the information that we can get. And that's the next thing that they will, of course, try and control.
Yeah. With the recent passage over here, the Net Neutrality Act going on.
Yeah.
What about in the UK? How is the internet controlled or regulated? Is it?
Well, they want the Prime Minister David Cameron wanted to have some sort of code and basically for people to have like a login. Obviously, someone at Amazon or Google or someone said, actually, Dave, that's not going to work, mate, and you're going to interfere with us making lots of money. So that's not really a very good idea. So they haven't really decided what they want to do. They know that there's an online presence that makes them uncomfortable, and they know that they want to do something about it. My guess is they will take their lead from the States, because that's what England does now. GCHQ takes its lead from the NSA, and I think we will follow your lead. That's my gut feeling.
Yeah. So a lot of people actually support net neutrality, unfortunately, because they really think that these enormous corporations, which again have inextricable ties to government, so you can't really say that they're completely separate entities. So that kind of confuses people's minds. So so they see like Comcast or AT&T or Verizon, or Cablevision providing monopoly-like services and very few competitors.
Yes.
But again, people don't tend to see all the regulations and laws that stifle competition and restrict people from starting up their own broadband companies and competing with them. Because once you allow that, once you remove all the regulations and barriers to entry, the prices of all of these services will just plummet, go way down, and the quality will go. That's just how the free market works. This is the incentives of the marketplace, right?
Yes.
So it's pretty insane to think that if government begins to exert control over the internet, again, net neutrality is basically like everybody's going to have equal internet speed. I mean, of course, one size fits all, right? it's the same thing all the time. But it's really absurd to think that, if somebody has an increased need for fast internet connection, let's say you have a business and you really are dependent on having high-speed internet, because you talk to people overseas, why should that person have to come down in their quality of service as the same guy who just watching videos in his basement, like for fun? Like, it doesn't make sense. If people are willing to pay more, they should get more. That's what the marketplace. Absolutely. That's what the marketplace is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we send with the band, we send large files for film and the other stuff I told you we're doing, and I need a really good internet speed. and I'm happy to pay for that. I need a good broadband speed. I'm happy to pay for it because I need it, and that's how that's about the only premise it should work on, really. Sadly, if you don't have the money, I suppose you could say, well, that's not fair on that guy, but that's how the whole market works. You can't always reduce something to the lowest, not the lowest, but that one size fits all, as you say, won't necessarily work. And that's just, it's also human nature for some people to have different demands. Some people some people want a Ferrari. I don't want a Ferrari. But if they have the money to it, they should be allowed to buy it if they have the ear. So I think it is the one size. If you're not careful, you do go to the old East European mentality where all the cars look the same and all the houses look the same, apart from the very people who are in government who have lovely cars and lovely houses.
Yeah. So basically, people are afraid to be unequal in freedom, but they would rather be equal in slavery, right? So if you if you really desire a society where you have free food, free healthcare, nobody owns anything or everybody owns everything, and we all have the same job, why don't you just go to prison, right? Because that's essentially what it is. You're protected. Yes, it is. Yeah. You're completely surveilled. You have no private property, no freedom of association, no freedom of speech. Yep. And that's the definition of communism, socialism, and basically prison.
Yeah. Also, we have to accept people are different. If you took a town and everyone started off with $1,000 at the beginning of the month, at the end of the month, some people would be bankrupt. Some people would have $10,000. Some people would have the same $1,000. People are different. We have to accept that. And my problem with this, as you say, the government one size fits all. It doesn't accept that. It doesn't want us to be different. And I have a huge problem with that because some people, we do act to different situations differently, and that should be celebrated, not restricted.
Yeah, and then going along with that is people think that if there's a problem in society, it's the fault of the rich, and so the solution should be to steal the productivity and the success of people who actually worked for their wealth,
which is fine. We have this demonization thing in the UK, this rich thing, and there are some very, very bad rich people. There are some very, very bad poor people. It's they just are. Every demographic has its villains and heroes. It just does, and I think you have to accept some people are very good at making money in an honest way. Those guys who started up Google, whatever their ties may or may have not been to the NSA, and I know there's all sorts of discussions about that, but just having the idea of we're going to start this search engine is it takes nuts. And society needs people with that drive and energy. In the same way, it needs nurses, firemen, doctors. That's how it works. And I think success should be celebrated, and those who are unable to success should be supported. Some people can't play the game. That's not their fault either. Some people aren't designed to this mad game we have in this capitalist world that we've got. Some people are not built to succeed in that arena, and they shouldn't be penalised either. And I think it's finding a balance.
Yeah, the whole idea of communism is basically one of jealousy, enviousness, and envy and covetousness. Like you envy the person who has more than you, right? And so basically you feel it's your right to take, by means of government, of course, that which people, those things that people have, what they consider to be too much, right? How much money do you need? How many cars do you need? How many houses do you need? Well, to me, the better question is, how did they achieve that wealth, right? Because if they achieved the wealth by providing value to society, let's say, for example, Steve Jobs, right? Nobody had to force people to buy iPhones and iPads and iPods,
exactly right?
He became wealthy because he provided a high quality product that people flocked to. They love the guy for it, right?
Absolutely right.
That's the definition of the free market. And you know what the definition of government is? Creating a crappy product that you have to force people at gunpoint because nobody would ever buy it voluntarily.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, the whole coffee shop that just came out of I don't know how long Starbucks have been going, but it seems like the mid-90s. Something like that. I'm not a Starbucks fan particularly, but someone somewhere sat down and said, let's do a designer coffee shop. Charge a bit more for the coffee, but make loads of different coffee and give it like a give it like a lifestyle, you know, and it worked. You've got to get. You have to say whoever started that. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the workings of Starbucks or Cafe Nero or whoever else, but it's an idea that they saw through. They had the energy to make it work, and on a slightly different level, we're involved in a couple of independent movies, and when you see the work, a writer. This one movie we're doing, the guy has written it, directed it, and produced it, and the energy levels he's needed over the last 5 years to get this to the Cannes Film Festival is breathtaking. Wow. And you know, entertainment needs that. Society needs those people with that energy and desire. That's it. You have to applaud it and not suppress it. Trying to make a movie in the UK, I mean, the government are so anti-art in the UK. It's really? Just. It's horrible. It is horrible. And you have to, everybody goes abroad. Everybody goes abroad for their money. I mean, it's the same as us. We don't work in the UK at all. All our money's in Europe and America. It's where we get paid. Britain just has, it does not support its own artists. It doesn't support its own film. It doesn't support its own theatre. All the theatre in the West End is driven by foreign money from tourists. It's not driven by... I mean, the only thing the government really supports is opera and some of the classic arts, you know. But so yeah, you wouldn't. I mean, we're a pretty small band. We've sold a lot of records and stuff, but we generated money for the country, and it's not seen like that. Imagine what the Beatles generated for the UK or the Rolling Stones. These people are not nearly celebrated enough. Their art is celebrated, but as an export, they're not. As a commercial entity, they're not celebrated enough. They've created huge amounts of wealth for all sorts of industries. And I find it just bizarre the way we don't really embrace that over here. I'm not sure what it's like in America, but we certainly don't here.
Yeah, that reminds me of a, you know, the activity of wealthy people to actually move their businesses, you know, close down shop, let's say, for example, in America, and open up a plant, let's say, in Mexico, or in,
yes.
you know, you know, like some like Vietnam or Thailand or Cambodia, or somewhere like that, where they can pay people less. And then people, you know, people over here are saying, you know, that's horrible. You know, you're destroying the American economy. You're abandoning, you know, you're taking away American jobs. So, you know, these people are you know, exploiting it. But then the first thing I ask these people is, okay, wait a minute. Why are they doing that? Why are they closing down their company in America and moving it across an ocean, which itself is an expensive venture? Like, that's not cheap, you know. Why would they go through the hassle of doing that? And you know, if the taxation in a country is getting so stifling and oppressive that the business owner makes a decision to move across an ocean, I think that's pretty indicative of an oppressive government. You know? Absolutely,
you should. Those people. The first thing, I mean, the UK we called it the council, which is your local government, and they should be bending over backwards to keep businesses in their town. They should be making it easy to be self-employed, easy to start businesses. I mean, trying to start a business in the UK, you know, the red tape and just the rent and the taxes. As you say, it's built for the purposes of the oppressor. Nothing to do with the freedom of movement or what's the word I'm looking for? Entrepreneurial sort of spirit. That's the guy. There's a very famous inventor in the UK called Dyson. The Dyson Hoovers and the Dyson kettle, and he had to go to France. He couldn't get any money out of the UK. I mean, it's just like, you know, these people should be valued, and they're not. And hey, you know, so.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. You're right. The wealth in a society is generated from the entrepreneurs, from the people, the small business owners, from the inventors, from people who, you know, with the creative spirit that go out, start businesses, and create jobs. That's how you create. That's how you increase wealth. That's how you increase standard of living. And I don't know if you heard about what Hillary Clinton recently said a few months ago. She said, you know, what she says, businesses and corporations don't create jobs. And she was called out on that completely. So many people said, "What the hell are you talking about? Do you understand anything?" You know. Basically, she's saying, you know, if politicians write on a piece of paper, we're going to create 10 million jobs. That's it. Poof! It's magic. 10 million jobs will be created. And they seem to think that they have that kind of, you know, supernatural, godlike deity power that they can just will wealth You know, just
Yes.
they just print money and oh poof, we're all
Yeah.
rich. Like,
Yeah.
what?
With Hillary Clinton's running for the Democrats, what do people think in America? Do they think Bill Clinton's past is going to catch up with her because of his association with people like Epstein, for example? And there's quite a few sexual assault allegations against Clinton, isn't there, Bill Clinton? I was wondering, is there a general feeling that that will sort of bite her on the arse eventually, or that won't be an issue?
I'm sure that a lot of people have done, research on that kind of stuff. Personally, I don't really look into any politician anymore at all. Like,
Okay.
I just have isolated myself, stepped back, and I categorically oppose people trying to use government to improve their lives, because I think that's a complete contradiction, an oxymoron. Because the definition of government is the violation of property rights. When you talk about taxation. And by the way, I wanted to mention one thing. When you were saying if you don't like to pay your taxes because it's going to be wasted, right? It's going to be put to inefficient means.
Based on that, I don't mind paying taxes, but I do have a problem with paying them from the point of view that I know that they're not spent wisely.
Yeah. So I wanted to say that with voluntarism, one thing that I understand, actually not, and also Austrian economics, is understanding when something is a monopoly, like the government, right? And it has absolutely no competition from any outside entity. What incentive do they have to actually please the people? They have no incentive, because taxation is not a voluntary thing, right?
No.
People are forced to fund, the NSA or the war on terror, or bailouts and subsidies and warfare and welfare and all these things. You have no choice where your tax money is going. So if they are wasting it, what do they care? Because we have no choice to pay,
and they're getting paid anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
They get paid. They get paid for the pleasure. Absolutely right. I mean, I find it is an insane system, and it's a very interesting concept. Imagine if you had two governments, and one had to be more appealing and commercial than the other. You'd suddenly get this open market system within government that would try and please us and you could subscribe up to whichever government you thought was fairer. Then they'd have to play a very different game.
If you're talking about a scenario like that, I would contend you could no longer call them governments, because if they're actually trying to please the citizen, you would more likely call them businesses, right?
Yes,
because then they wouldn't be able to force you to fund them. You would be able to choose to fund them voluntarily, right? And that would be the definition of a business, and you would have a completely different dynamic.
Yeah, there's a hospital that my brother and I raise money for on a regular basis, called the Royal Marsden. It's a very progressive cancer research hospital, and what they do, which is fantastic. They have a regular fundraising, we get involved in it, and they do this online stuff, and they show you where your money's gone. It's brilliant. So you've raised, we've just done a march. Did a marathon. The marathon raised about £1.5 million. I mean, we didn't, but everybody. Yeah. So, let's say $2.5 million or something, and they show you. They took cameras into their theatres, and they showed you work that the doctors were doing with the equipment funded by the charity. Mm-hmm. It's brilliant. Mm-hmm. It was just amazing. You saw, well, that's where our money is, and they're very open about what the executives get paid and the administration costs. It's a very transparent, and it's quite reassuring. Imagine trying to do that with government. Say, okay, can you show me where my car tax is gone?
Transparency, right?
Yeah. Okay, you've taken my £250 this year for my car tax.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it ring fenced? Is it even in transportation? I bet it's not.
Yeah.
I bet it's just been sucked up by the deficit.
Well, most likely, I think 60% of it anyway over here goes towards military spending, which basically means it goes towards death and destruction, and occupations, invasions, and drone strikes.
That's exactly right.
Anything you can imagine related to the military.
Exactly.
But there's a famous Austrian economist. His name is Walter Block, and one of his famous lines is, we should. He's like, people ask me, should we privatize everything? And I respond, we should privatize everything that walks or everything that doesn't walk. And since everything walks or doesn't walk, or moves or doesn't move, then we should privatize everything. Because again, when you privatize things, you are changing the incentives, right? Because now people have to actually please the customer. Because if you don't, you're going to go out of business, right? And a business cannot thrive without profits, right? And profits must only be obtained voluntarily, right? Because once you begin to use the guns of government, you have a mutant, wicked variation of the free market known as crony capitalism or corporate fascism, right? And then once you completely force it, you have government. So this is the beautiful thing about the private free market, is that they have to please the customer. It's all about accountability and responsibility and transparency. There is no other way around it. Like try being a vendor on, let's say, Amazon and selling something, and then somebody sends you money and then you don't send them anything. What's gonna happen to you?
No, I understand the concept.
People are gonna write up, this guy's a fraud. Don't ever do business with him. Don't ever say, word gets out. Reputation means everything, right? It's all about reputation.
Yes, yeah. I personally think with certain essential services, you need to ring fence them. They should ideally be non-political. They should just have the money they need: health, fire, looking after the elderly, looking after the homeless, the infirm, the vulnerable. That should all be just taken from our tax. I don't mind paying taxes for those people to benefit. I don't mind that at all. But the trouble is, that's not the game anymore. That's not what's being played, and we're being lied to.
Is there any last message that you want to give to my listeners who are listening, that relating to your views on government?
Well, I just think it's information. Just inform yourself outside the mainstream media. I mean, there's there's great journalists like Greg Palast, or there's reporters like yourself and Richie Allen, and whether you agree with these people or not, listen what they have to say. I listen to Alex Jones. I don't agree with a lot of things he says, but he's trying to work outside of the norm, as is the other people. Scott Horton, I've mentioned, and blah blah. It goes on and on. Listen to individual, talking about the economy. I think Martin Armstrong is a really interesting guy. He's an interesting economist, and got people like Karen Houdis, and I think these people just have a knowledge. And they view things differently. I love listening to William Binney, and I think guys like this are they don't come with the agenda that mainstream media does. And I think it's up to people just to inform themselves. Just for 1 minute, turn your phone off, turn the X Factor off, and just for 10 minutes, just see what people are saying. And that's it. And you might think it's all bollocks. You might think, I don't agree with any of that. I'm a Hillary guy. I'm going to vote for Hillary. Well, at least you've made the decision, but don't make it without the information.
Yeah, that's some critical thinking never hurt anybody, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Fred. Awesome conversation. I appreciate it. So this is Danilo from Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network, theconsciousresistance.com and theseedsofliberty.com. Wishing everyone have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.
Cheers.